Hello, my name is Emmanuel Cortez, and this is my midterm presentation about the space race that took place during the Cold War. A little bit about myself. I'm currently living in Mexico in the state of Oaxaca, and I plan on coming back pretty soon. So, why did I choose a space race? If you want me to give you an honest answer, honestly, it sounded like the coolest thing that was on the list to choose from. What was the space race? The space race was a competition between the United States and the Soviet Union during the Cold War to see who can achieve the greatest advancements in space exploration. And all this took place between 1957 and 1975, where the United States and the Soviet Union both wanted to gain strategic advantage in space technology. But where did this all start? Well, it all started on the first satellite, Sputnik 1. It was the first satellite launched by the Soviet Union on October 4th, 1957. It had many years in the making since the 19th century by a scientist named Konstantin, who pioneered the field of aeronautics, which is the study of flight, while the rocket engineer Sergei Korolev is credited for the development of the first stage of the rocket. It was a small sphere at 58 centimeters at diameter and weighed 39 kilograms. The Sputnik 1 was able to send signals back to scientific stations, and all this shocked many Americans that concluded with the United States creating the NASA program. Alexei Leonov was a Soviet cosmonaut who was born on May 30th, 1934. He was the first person to conduct a spacewalk, which he did on March 18th, 1965. During a mission, Leonov served as a commander on the Soviet half of the Apollo test project, the first joint US-Soviet space mission in 1975. He was also a highly decorated military pilot and was awarded with the title of Hero in the Soviet Union, the country's highest honor, twice. He was an accomplished artist and created several paintings during his lifetime in space. He wrote two books about his experience in space: The Sun Above the Horizon and Two Sides of the Moon, which he co-authored with Apollo's astronaut David Scott. Sadly, he passed away on October 11th, 2019 at the age of 85. Yuri Gagarin. Yuri was a Soviet cosmonaut who was the first person to travel to space on April 12, 1961. He was born on March 9th, 1934. Gagarin's space flight lasted 108 minutes, during which he orbited the Earth once aboard the spacecraft Vostok 1. After his historic spaceflight, Gagarin became an international celebrity and a symbol of the Soviet technological and scientific prowess. He received numerous honors and awards, including the title of Hero of the Soviet Union, the country's highest honor. He sadly died also on March 27, 1968, in a plane crash while training on the flight, where he was only 34 years old at the time of his death. Wernher von Braun. He was a German rocket scientist who played a key role in the development of rocket technology in Germany and the United States. He was born on March 23, 1912, in Germany, which is now a certain part of Poland, I believe, where he was born at in this town. Von Braun developed the V 2 rocket for Nazi Germany during the World War II, and after the war, he moved to the United States to work for the U.S. Army. He later worked for NASA, where he played a significant role in the development of the Saturn V rocket that was used on Apollo missions to the moon. He was a proponent in the space exploration and believed that humans should establish a permanent presence on other planets, which is kind of bizarre and kind of crazy, right? He received numerous honors and awards during his career, including the National Medal of Science in 1975. He sadly passed away on June 16, 1977, in Alexandria, Virginia, at the age of 65. And here is my favorite president, John F. Kennedy. He was the 35th President of the United States and served from 1961 to the day of his assassination on 1963. And during his presidency, Kennedy made a goal of landing man on the moon as a national priority. He went on to deliver a famous speech on May 25th, 1961, in which he challenged the United States to land a man on the moon before the end of the decade. Kennedy's commitment to the space program led to significant increases in funding for NASA and the development of the Apollo program. He witnessed the first Apollo mission, Apollo 7, in 1968, but did not make it to live up to watch a successful moon landing on 1969. Kennedy's vision for space program is often credited for inspiring a generation of Americans and helping establish the United States as a leader in space exploration. And here it is, the Apollo program, Apollo 11, which was initiated by President John F. Kennedy in 1961, with the goal of landing man on the moon and returning him safely to Earth. The first successful moon landing occurred on July 20th, 1969, during the Apollo 11 mission. Astronauts Neil Armstrong and Edwin Buzz Aldrin became the first humans to walk on the moon, while astronaut Michael Collins orbited above them in a command module. Armstrong, while walking on the moon, said, "That's one small step for man and one giant leap for mankind." Apollo 11 wasn't the final mission, as the Apollo program consisted of 17 missions, with the last mission, Apollo 17, taking place in 1972. The Apollo program was an enormous achievement for the United States and helped establish the country as a leader in space exploration. And the Apollo program also resulted in significant advances in technology and engineering that have had lasting impacts on society. And here is a long timeline based on the space race. On October 4th, 1957, the Soviet Union launches Sputnik 1, the first artificial satellite into space. This marks the start of the space race between the United States and the Soviet Union. On both sides compete for technological superiority. On November 3rd, 1957, Sputnik 2 is launched, carrying the first living animal in space, a dog named Laika, who dies within hours of the space flight. On January 31, 1958, the United States launches the first satellite, Explorer 1, which also becomes the first to detect the Van Allen radiation belt. March 5th, 1958, Explorer 2 is launched but fails to reach the orbit. March 17th, 1958, the United States launches Vanguard 1, the first solar-powered satellite, as well as the oldest artificial object still in space or in orbit. On May 15th, 1958, the Soviet Union launches Sputnik 3, the only Soviet satellite launched that year. On July 29th, 1958, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration (NASA) is established. On October 11th, 1958, NASA launches its first spacecraft, Pioneer 1. On December 18th, 1958, the United States initiates the SCORE signal communications by orbiting relay equipment, the world's first communication satellite. January 2, 1959, Luna 1 is launched. It is the first man-made object to orbit the sun. On February 17, 1959, Vanguard 2 is the world's first weather satellite is launched. September 12, 1959, Luna 2 is launched and becomes the first spacecraft to reach the moon, as well as the first artificial object to land on another celestial body. 2 days later, it also becomes the first to crash into another celestial body. On August 19, 1960, the Soviet Union launches Sputnik 5 with several animals, plants, and fungi on board. They all survive. On April 12, 1961, astronaut Yuri Gagarin becomes the first human in space aboard Vostok 1. On May 5th, 1961, Alan Shepard becomes the first American in space. He also performs the first pilot-controlled spaceflight on board Freedom 7. On May 25, 1961, U.S. President John F. Kennedy challenges the nation and the land a man on the moon to bring him back to safety onto Earth. On June 16, 1963, Valentina, I don't know how to pronounce that last name, a crew member of the Vostok 6, becomes the first woman in space. She also is the first civilian in space. On December 5th, 1963, the Navy Navigation Satellite System is the first satellite navigation system is launched. On November 28th, 1964, Mariner 4 is launched and performs the first flyby of the planet Mars. March 18th, 1965, Alexei Leonov becomes the first human to conduct a spacewalk during the Voskhod 2 mission. On February 3rd, 1966, Luna 9 becomes the first spacecraft to achieve a soft landing on the moon and any other celestial body. March 31, 1966, Luna 10 is launched and becomes the first man-made satellite to orbit another celestial body, in this case, the moon. January 27, 1967, Apollo 1 catches on fire during a launch of the rehearsal test, killing 3 of its members. Wow. On April 23, 1967, Vladimir Komarov becomes the first person to fly in space twice. April 24th, 1967, Komarov dies during a re-entry of the Earth's atmosphere, becoming the first person to die during a space flight. July 20th, 1969, Apollo 11 crew members Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin become the first humans to touch on the moon. November 19th, 1969, Pete Conrad becomes the first man to dance on the moon. He's getting jiggy with it. December 15th, 1970, Venera 7 becomes the first space flight to land on another planet, Venus. On July 15th, 1975, the Apollo Soyuz test project is launched, the first U.S.-Soviet space flight, as well as the first joint multinational space flight. The ASTP marks a gradual easing in tensions between the two superpowers. Well, that is all for my presentation for tonight. I would like to thank you all for watching my presentation and a big thanks for the help on my research. I hope my presentation was good enough, even though I made a lot of errors and mistakes, but I hope it was good enough to show a bit about the space race during the Cold War. I am Emmanuel Cortez, and good night.